ve por la paellera, venga, que las 2 de la tarde ya están aquí. Miren, bañador, en las chanclas, todo despeinado porque no me dio tiempo nada ponerme las chanclas y el bañador. Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. Eso.
Hi and welcome to the Delivery Manager Daily YouTube channel. But in this episode we're going to talk on a couple of things, what a delivery manager is, and then we're going to move into some of the characteristics and skills that you'll need to be a really good one. So if you go to the blog, mariosblog.co.uk, and you go to the post, trying to be a better delivery manager, constantly learning. I wrote this back in 2021 and it was a point of reflection as I you learn as you progress, kind of you get to a point where you've started to kind of correct and improve upon the things that you're not good at. You started to hopefully get some awareness and you've matured into your role and you're starting to kind of now find what you can do even better, and the margin becomes smaller because hopefully you're improving all the time. So that's not to say that you ever reach perfection, but you try and then hone the things that are more nuanced, and this post back in 2021 kind of talks about some of that, and I just want to talk about some of that as I've just explained what a delivery manager does. So if you read the post, you'll talk about that we have these kind of 10 strategies for project execution, and this is like a little bit of a checklist basically of all the things you should think about at a high level when you're delivering a project. Now I'm going to just talk about using my hands a lot again, aren't I? I'm going to talk about the things that work for me every time. What I think I've done is, outside of all the complexity of everything you could talk about in project delivery, I found something that works for me and the projects all the time. I remember being so overwhelmed when I was at the start of my career, being responsible for projects that really I didn't know how to entirely execute, and I didn't have the people skills, or I didn't have the technical acumen or capability. And as I've learned and I look at how I deliver projects now successfully, you build up a playbook, a set piece, if you were thinking from a football perspective, right? This well-practiced repetitive behaviour that more often than not will yield a good result. And I've built up this kind of this set of processes and principles and things that I always do on every project, and I just roll it out every time. Now that's not to say that it's a cookie cutter approach, because every project's different, but what I think I've got is a very specific set of things that, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm coaching someone to say here's how I think you should be a better project manager, do these things at minimum. And no matter who you are, if you just do these things, the project will be in a reasonable state. And with today's kind of complex world and the state of a lot of projects, having a project in a reasonable state is often a win, right? So I'm just going to go through some of these and hopefully get you thinking about some of the things that you might want to do on your next project. So you've got to begin with the end in mind. So you're here to deliver a thing, and often what's not really thought about is, well, how do you get to the end? When is this project done? It can be so overwhelming to look at the end of 10 or 12 or 20 sprints and think, well, we're only here for a fixed period of time to do a thing, and you can get lost in the mire of the day-to-day and just churning through the project and churning through the project. And if you're ever in an interview, often what the interviewers will want to know is, tell me your time on a project that you've seen from kind of start to finish, or not an elegant term, but from cradle to grave. And often a lot of people can't do that because they often don't see a project to the end. They either move on, or the project goes wrong, or something. I try and look at, and recommend that others look at, well, what is the end goal, the end state, and be really fastidious about just working towards that. That's the end point, and you really should be thinking about that on a daily basis. It should be written on your whiteboards, it should be documented, it should be reflected in your sprint goals, but just make sure everyone's clear on where they're going and where that end point is. It sounds really straightforward, but you'd be amazed at how many people don't actually constantly think about, well, where's the end? What is it again? How do we get there? I'm not going to go through all these, but there's a couple that I wanted to pick out, and one of them is listen to lead. It's often quite easy to think that, well, the way to get things done is to just kind of rule with an iron fist and just, right, you do this, you do this, you do this. I'm convinced that if my teams just didn't do any thinking and just did what I say, the projects would be absolutely kind of perfect. In reality, that's not only probably not true, it's just not the way to kind of build high-performing teams. And one of the things and the skills that I've only recently developed, when I say recently, we're talking like 3 to 4 years, I guess, is that ability to listen more to what the team needs and wants, and to be able to disseminate between a real need and a real thing, and just having people listen to. I want to be listened to all the time. If I don't feel that I'm being listened to, I get very frustrated. The amount of times that I didn't reciprocate that in teams is somewhat embarrassing, I guess, as I was coming up through my career. So it's something that I've learned that's really important to me, that don't want everything to be too open. There have been times where people wallow in open. In fact, something on all the videos that I've done recently, I've referred to a specific project, and this is that same project. If you give teams all the freedom in the world, I often find they come back and say, I need a bit more instruction, a bit more kind of, they want to work within frameworks of start, middle and end, and they need to know what they're doing, they need to know why they're doing it. And sometimes some people don't cope, and some teams don't cope with huge amounts of flexibility and freedom, because for many a job is you come to work, you're told what to do, you do it to the best of your ability, and you go home. Now that's kind of against the whole agile spirit, I guess, when you talk about self-organising, empowered teams just doing the right thing at the right time. But the amount of times that I've given teams so much flexibility, actually work are slow to a crawl, because people have become impotent through the ability to make their own decisions and choices. So a good delivery manager is able to temper that kind of empowerment, but direction and steer, to make sure that teams feel guided and on the right track, but are then also empowered to, within their sphere of experience and expertise, do the things that they think are right to get there. That's a real subtle nuance of people management, I guess, but it's something you're going to have to become really, really skilled at, because what I've learned is being able to get that right increases the likelihood of success on a project by about 60-70%, and that's one of the things that has been the most difficult to work on. So to be a good leader, you've got to listen. So one of the things that I've learned really recently, actually, and it's something that we do as human beings, we tend to procrastinate. We do the things that we like to do, and we put off the difficult things. And whenever I've been on a project in the past, I've always been able to pinpoint the bits that are going to be challenging, the bits that are going to be difficult, the conversations that are going to be hard to have. And I've always shied away from them, thinking, well, we'll do it later. And I've often excused that by saying, well, we'll get a bit of success elsewhere and we'll build upon it. But what I've learned is that if you can immediately identify issues, doing those things first are really important. Now, if it's a conversation that needs to be had, a misunderstanding about scope, there is no point in ignoring that. Go and seek clarification and go and get clarification. If it's a technical implementation that you see is only starting to be thought about in sprint 3 or 4, but you know there are considerable downstream dependencies, bring that into the first sprint or an earlier sprint and do a development spike, for example. And it's really important, because I've seen projects go entirely in the bin because integration elements or APIs to services that the project knows nothing about aren't being considered until later down the line. And actually there was no reason to not bring them up earlier. They've simply just been avoided through a lack of expertise, or not being able to onboard teams at the right time, or just kind of, we'll deal with that later. That is not how to run a project. So one of the things as a delivery manager you have to do is be able to notice what are going to be the more spicier things in a project, and deal with them as early as possible. If you do that, again, you increase your mean likelihood of success in a project, and it's something that I've tested again and again and again. And as uncomfortable as it is sometimes to kind of point out immediate issues, validate them. You don't want to be a doomsayer and like that boy who cries wolf type of thing. But it's important that if you can validate an issue that you can see and justify and articulate and talk about, you really need to bring it to attention first, even if it's just documented in the RAID log and everyone acknowledges it. But as a DM, you've got to be really kind of robust and strong and focused on finding those things and getting them sorted as quickly as possible. The thing that I've learned, and again, I'm talking about the same project in my mind as I talk through some of these, which is a recent project, is accepting imperfection. These very videos, right, are not perfect. If you watch the last one, the saturation and the exposure was wrong. If you watch the one before that, the sound was wrong. I'd set the volume on the camera wrong. But a bit like the podcasts that I've done, they've hopefully gotten better over time. I've bought a better mic and a pop shield, and I'm learning how to play with this camera. And I'm not too fussed that the videos that I'm putting out aren't perfect yet. What I'm doing these videos for is firstly for me to practice, but also hopefully to help others. And as I do more and more, they will get better. That's me accepting imperfection, right? I'm not trying to be a YouTuber or anything else. I'm just trying to do something fairly utility to help people in my field. Now, what I've also learned in teams is, especially those with technical bent, people want perfection straight away. They will become impotent trying to set everything up. Architects want to spend weeks over HLD document, high-level designs, or configuring pipelines. DevOps engineers want to play with all the latest tools and experiment and compare and contrast, instead of just setting up a DevOps pipeline that might need to be tweaked and changed later. Test and assurance people want to deliberate and pontificate over complex multi-tiered assurance strategies and white papers and things without actually just doing the sufficient and minimum needed to move forward. And when I talked earlier about teams, if you give them too much flexibility and too much free rein, they can become impotent. So can the chase of perfectionism. And we all like to say, well, we're perfectionists. And we often are. It's an integral kind of element in most people's psyche and personality. But having the strength to be able to just do something that's just not quite perfect, actually that might be a bit ropey, but then you can build and iterate on it. And actually, and I won't get into lean in this video, we'll talk about that on another, but that's the notion of lean. And it actually, it's agile too, right? It's that constant inspect, adapt and improve over time. It's that continuous delivery. And hopefully what you do over time is you get to a much better thing. And what I know from doing the podcast is that the podcasts that I'm doing now are so much more professional. They sound good, the intros and the idents and the stings are better. And I've started off that journey again with these videos. Hopefully this one will be a good balance between editing and image quality and lighting and sound. And the next one I do will be better and better. And what I haven't done is not started doing the videos because I want everything to be perfect. And it's the same in projects, right? Just do the things that are needed to move forward. And as long as you're constantly moving forward, that progress and momentum will get you to that end point that we talked about earlier. Listening and watching, and if you're on the socials, follow me on Twitter at MarioDC. Go to the blog. Don't forget to like and subscribe this video too. It really help as I do more and more, hopefully get better at them. You can follow me on Twitter at MarioDC, Delivery Manager Daily, all over the internet, and listen to the podcast too, because hopefully in 2023, which we're in, I think we're on the